Hi all, hope you're doing wonderfully well. Apologies for a bit of a delay since my last video. Best laid plans, you've heard of that. I also had a comment about maybe trying to improve my audio a bit. Hopefully the sound here is a bit better. You guys can let me know if that's the case, hopefully so. I mentioned in my last video that I would share some information about how I manage my images and media while traveling. Hopefully we're all getting back to traveling soon, so the timing seems to be right for a look at that now. There are some unique considerations for the older photographer when traveling, at least for me. In a nutshell, I don't want too many steps to manage while I am traveling. I also don't want to have to carry too much extra gear, of course. But I do want a way to easily match up my travel images to the exact locations that I visited while traveling. This sounds easy, but it really isn't, at least not for me when I'm older. I also now have video needs that need to be managed right alongside the still images, and they do have to be managed somewhat differently, I've discovered. So how do I do it? Before we get on with that, just the usual small request to consider subscribing to my channel if themes like this appeal to you. This is a channel for us older photographers, and I concentrate on practical things, not on selling you stuff. So I would be eternally grateful. Thank you very much. All right, right out of the gate, I don't spend any time reviewing my images or my footage while I'm traveling. I do chimp while I'm shooting to check focus and to check composition quickly, or to confirm that I've recorded sound in the case of video. But I do none of the culling and sorting that I normally would once I get back to the studio. So I don't have any advice for you to offer you in terms of culling and sorting while traveling. So what that means is that I take enough CF Express cards and SD cards to eliminate the need to reformat any of them while traveling. In other words, I never wipe the data to be able to shoot more while I'm on the road. I don't transfer my files off the cards to another device and then reuse the cards. Instead, I want multiple copies on multiple devices. So let me explain further. When I travel, all of my collected images are copied back in the hotel room each night off the cards. Most of us older photographers do stay in locations with nighttime power and nighttime light and comfortable beds, thankfully. We don't typically stay in rustic tents on a hillside that don't have any power source. Because I have power and light, I devote some time each evening to a predetermined routine in order to be ready for the next day. First, all of my camera batteries are recharged. I bring along a little charging station that allows me to recharge multiple batteries at once. One plug in the room becomes that charging station. Next, I examine and I clean all of my camera equipment in case I'd been out in a dusty location. Dust spots, grime, anything else that needs to be removed gets removed, and everything is put away for the next day. Next, I take all of the cards that I used that day, all of the data cards, and line them up on a table. I then open up my computer and open up my local copy of Adobe Bridge. Aha! If you don't use Adobe products, that's not a problem, but it may make this sequence of steps a little harder to follow. Notice that I didn't say Lightroom. I'm not looking to catalog or edit my files while on the road, only to download them and to organize them. These are different things. If you know Lightroom, then you know that working with Lightroom on the road is possible, but it's not that straightforward. You either always have to carry your main catalog with you somehow, or you need to work with a local catalog and then have to import that local copy back into your main catalog later on. Well, I don't bother with either of those. Instead, Adobe Bridge gives me all of the ability to download and organize my files without the need to create any local catalogs. Here's how I do it. So in order to simulate what I do on the road, I've created two areas today. The first is called Camera Card, which will simulate the SD card that I normally carry or normally take out of my camera at the end of the day in order to download my files. So here you can see that I've got a mixed collection of media. I've got some CR3 files, which are the raw files from my Canon camera, and I've also got some DJI files. Now, ignore the fact that they that they depict the roof of my house, and I was using my drone to inspect the roof of my house, but they are a different media. They are from a drone, so I like to separate out the different media types that I collect. You don't have to do that. You can dump everything into that day's folder, but personally, I just like to organize my media this way. So I have my Canon RAW files, and I have my DJI drone files. So what I've done in order to simulate my computer is to create something called Travel Drive. So I have my SD card and I have my Travel Drive, which is my travel computer. Within that Travel Drive, I have a folder for the trip. In this case, I've imagined that I'm taking a trip to Algonquin Park, and I've created a folder for Algonquin Park. And within that folder, I have another folder for every single day of that trip. So day 1, day 2, and day 3. And within that folder, and this is where I'm sure some of you will say, that's ridiculous, I'm not going to do that. But within that folder, I like to organize the different types of media that I actually collect. But as I say, you can put every type of media into that day's folder if that's an easier way for you to do it. And you can also ignore the fact that I've got these little icons here. I like to organize my folders with different icons, so I assign them different icons as well. So we have our SD card. It has a mixed collection of media, and we have to move all of these files over to my travel computer. So I find the day that these images were shot, and then I find the right folder within that day to stick them into. I've already done that, so I've taken all of the Canon files from my SD card and I've already imported them into my Canon, into the Canon area of my day 1 folder. And as you can see, they're all here and they're now all resting peacefully in this folder. So what this means is that I now have a backup. I have my original SD card and I have a backup of those photos on my computer. So that's step 1, simply to bring them into the right place on the computer. Step 2 is really important as well for my process. The folder or the file names that are included for each of the files are meaningless to me. They tell me nothing about what has happened with that file or where it was shot, when it was shot. If you click on an individual file within Bridge, you get a lot of interesting information about the file. You get the metadata for how the file was shot, and you do get some information about when it was shot. Ignore the fact that this was created today. It was actually originally shot in 2020 October. So you do get some information, and yes, you can rely on that information, and you can search on that information in both Bridge and in Lightroom if you use Lightroom. But I like to rename my files in order to make them even more easy to find. Say I'm not working in Bridge or Lightroom and I want to quickly find a file or a folder, I can, through the name, do a search within the native Windows Explorer application or within the native Finder application on my Mac and easily find the file without having to launch anything related to Adobe. So that's the next step, to actually rename these files. So I will select all of the files, and then within the Tools menu, we'll go up to what is called Batch Rename. And I've created a preset for my batch rename process. And that's the really neat thing about both Adobe Bridge and Lightroom, that you can create these presets to make it easier for you to work this way. And you can easily identify how you want to set up your renaming. So I'm not going to go through the individual renaming convention that I have, but you will see at the bottom that the existing file name is converted from this to something more meaningful, which is this. So, I test drove this, so I'm just going to restart it again. And that will take us back to sequence number 1. So as you can see, my file structure consists of the name of the location where the image was shot, the year, month, and date that the image was shot. Even though that's embedded in the metadata over here, I prefer to have it actually in the file name. And then a simple sequence from 1 to 1000 if I happen to have, or 1 to 9999 if I happen to have that many photos for that day. I never do. All right, so I simply launch this preset and I hit rename. And as you can see, almost immediately, all of the files are renamed. And it's as simple as that. That's step 2 in my process. Step 3 and 4, I'm going to say right off the top, are things you do not need to do. You've completed all of the organization that I would strongly recommend that you do if you're interested in following my process. But I take it a couple of steps further. The other thing I do is there's something called append metadata, and I've set up some extra bits of information that I would like to attach to each file. So I simply run that, and it happens automatically. And then the last step I do, again, way beyond anything that I would recommend to any of you, I convert all of my CR3 files, all of my native RAW files from my Canon camera into a format called DNG. I'm not going to explain what DNG is. I'll happily give you some information if you're interested in it, or maybe do a future video about it. But I convert all of my files to DNG format, and I've set up a preset to do that. So I grab all of these files and simply go and put them on top of the preset, and it creates a separate collection of files that are in the DNG format that allow me to work with those files a little more easily, in my view. You might disagree with me, but I prefer to work in that format. And it still keeps the original files if I wish, but at this point I could delete them and be done with the original RAW files. I still have the original RAW files on my SD card, but here I've got a collection of DNG files which for me are easier to work with in the remainder of my process once I get them back to the studio. And that's it. That's everything I do on the road for anything that I shoot in any given day. I then put the SD cards away in a case, and I'll talk more about that in the remainder of this video. But that's it for how I work with my files on the road. One question I was asked recently was whether I could recommend a travel backup option that didn't require a computer. Personally, I've never used a direct-to-device backup option, meaning that there is no laptop in between the camera storage card and the bulk storage device. I always use a laptop. I may on occasion attach an external hard drive to my computer, but I specifically purchased a computer this time with a very large internal hard drive to hopefully eliminate the need for any external hard drive or third device. So why don't I use one of those computerless options, meaning a standalone hard drive, you've seen them, with a built-in SD card reader? Well, really that's for 2 reasons. I'm carrying a laptop anyway to write a journal of my trip, which I do every evening. And as already noted, when I download the media from my cards, I also rename them from the useless numbers assigned by Canon to a label that's meaningful to me, which consists of location name, date, and sequence number of shot. And you need a computer to do that. You can't do that on a standalone hard drive. My journal entries describe every stopping point made that day and what we did there, and include any interesting stories or anecdotes that support the images and the footage that were shot that day. I hate to admit it, but I just don't have the memory anymore to remember those small details. Unless I write them down the same day, well, everything gets jumbled up pretty quickly and is mostly gone from my memory in a week. Sad to say. Although I have heard that the hard drives with built-in SD card readers are reliable, They typically don't allow you to check exactly what is on the hard drive. Although I've heard that some now include apps that you can have on your phone that actually show you the contents of the drive. And most important, they don't allow you to organize the files in a way meaningful to you. They typically just grab your files and store them with the original file name in a folder that's labeled with the date and time that they were actually downloaded to the drive. It's not the date and time that the images were shot, though, and that's the issue. So you'll need some way of knowing whether you've already backed up those files on any given card, since the devices generally don't keep track and will just act on any card that you insert into the device. So that's way too complicated for me, and they just aren't for me. I should mention as well that you don't need a heavy or a bulky laptop for my approach. Your travel laptop can be as light and inexpensive as you wish, as long as you can find a way to rename your files in a bulk fashion, as I do with Adobe Bridge. Adobe Bridge just makes it easier. I use a MacBook Air, but I don't need to. It's just the lightest laptop that I could find at the time. All right then. Thanks for your interest. Let me know in the comments below how you manage your travel media. And don't forget to like this video and consider subscribing to my channel for more content like this in the future. Thank you all, and see you very, very soon.